Hey Walter, I got my Kirby here. It's actually, mine is a G9. G9, no, I'm sorry, take that back, it's a G10. So, I don't know how often they upgrade their units. I believe that there's a couple of newer ones than this one here. So, yours could be 20 years old, 30 years old, who knows. But anyways, let's do a quick belt check. The automatic transmission's all that matters when you're working with a Kirby. Um, Got to set your belt to the off position. Make sure it's unlocked here, and the power head just rotates off real easy. A little hard to work with camera one hand, but as you can see, there's a bit of debris that builds up in there. Now, one thing you notice is that the belt refers to this mechanism here. When it's in the belt off position, the belt is actually stretched tight in here. So if you go to change the belt, you're going to want to make sure that the belt is on the on position, and that is actually the loosest. That loosens the belt, and so it will actually fall right off of the, what am I thinking? Right off the beater bar. So what I'm going to go ahead and do now is I'm going to rotate this over. These guys here, thumb action, undo those, pull the housing off here, and then you should be able to slip that beater bar right off. And along with the beater bar, oh gosh, the vacuum cleaner belt will be wrapped around it as well and should come off with it. But what we're going to go do now is I'm going to make sure that I clean this out pretty good. This housing is just aluminum, so I think I'm going to pull all the pieces off of it. I'm going to lube these guys up with some WD-40 just to keep the parts moving, because if these break, you can see that they're riveted on there, and you're pretty much having to replace the whole housing, which just seems kind of ridiculous, but that's the way that Kirby's built. They're pretty much built in pieces, so when a certain part of it breaks, you're having to replace the whole part. Sort of like the newer cars, you need a new bumper because you put a ding in the very edge of it. You think it'd be an easy fix, but they got to take the entire bumper off, either replace the entire bumper or repaint the entire bumper. And so one little tiny ding will end up costing you like $1,500 just to it's ridiculous. But anyways, I'm going to clean this bad boy up and get it all lubed up and ready to go. Alright, so one trick that I use to pull this beater bar out, because sometimes it's wedged in there pretty tight, because there's a slide for the here, and there's a slide on the other side. So there's a black end and there's a gray end. What I will do is I will grab it by the belt and give you some leverage to be yanking and pulling that out, because you can see there's quite a bit of dirt that is built up in there, and it really makes it really tight and difficult sometimes to pull that belt out. Now, one thing to note, if you take a look at that, you'll see numbers on those wheels. On a new belt or a new beater bar, which this is fairly new, those numbers actually correlate to, I don't know if they're millimeters, like 10 millimeters or what it is, but as the brushes begin to wear, you would go from setting 1, you align it on the other side to make sure it's rotated to the 1 position, then you move it to 2, and then you move it to 3, and then move it to 4, and then after that your brushes pretty much need to be replaced. But I would guess it would take a couple years of heavy use to actually do that. I mean, I've had this guy for 10 years and I've only replaced that beater bar once, and the reason why I replaced the beater bar is because I sucked up a you know, I pulled up a little screw or something and it put a divot or a dent in that beater bar right under the belt. And it was really weird because just that little tiny divot was enough to cause enough friction on that belt that it just kept snapping them one after another. So, you know, like, okay, ridiculous. Time to get a new beater bar. I think they're about 40 bucks. And as you can see, we have quite a bit of debris to clean up here, so I'm going to take it out by hand, and then I'm probably just going to rinse it under a sink to get it all cleaned up. And as we are putting things back together, I'm not actually replacing that belt. I was just showing you how it goes on there. See, it just slips over it real easy, and you'll see the indentation on your beater bar. I mean, they all have an indentation, but there's usually discoloration that's going on because it's just spinning in one spot, so the black of the belt is actually wearing off on here. And I believe you want the rigid side on the inside, and that just causes more traction for helping to spin that belt around. I might go online and check, make sure I remember right, but I believe that rigid side goes on the inside. So, as opposed to putting the smooth side on the inside of the bar, I think you want that rigid on that bar itself. Anyways, we're going to clean it all up. We're going to remove the hair off of and yarn off of the brushes. That does create stop airflow. It stifles it a little bit, and obviously all that debris in there doesn't help. So we're going to get it all cleaned up. And another place where debris might build up is inside the fan area here, and there's really nothing you can do except kind of stick your hand in there, maybe get a screwdriver and try to pull some debris out, but I don't see any debris, so we're good to go. Another thing is that string and hair sometimes get wound around that drive bar there. Just make sure that's clean. And that's actually the bar that spins the vacuum cleaner belt that turns the beater bar and does all that good stuff. So make sure that's cleaned up. Yeah, so I hope that helps, and I will show a little bit more as I'm putting it back together. Alright, so I've got everything cleaned up here. I took some WD-40 and I sprayed on these little thumb fasteners on here and just kind of twist and turn them a little bit to make sure it got pretty well lubed. I did contact the Kirby dealer. He did say that they verified that the rigid side of the belt, which you'll be able to identify easily, does go on the inside. So make sure that the rigid side of the belt is on the inside and the smooth side of the belt is on the outside. Now, when we put this in, we are not even going to worry about where it fastens for right now. What we are going to do is make sure that it's set to 1 on that side, set to 1 on that side, and then we are going to slip it into that position there. So I'm going to go ahead and do that and then go on to the next step. Okay, one thing to note, in the gray and the white side of the beater bar, one is actually wider than the other, so you might have to play around with it. The white goes on the left, black and gray goes on the right. And once it's slipped in there, you just kind of adjust that vacuum cleaner belt so it's like right in the middle there. It doesn't have to be exact, but as close as you can. It does take a little playing with it to get comfortable with slipping it back in there. It takes a little bit of work. I'm used to kind of doing it so I can get it in there fairly easily. I did take this thing off, so it's not on there yet, but I'm just demonstrating here. Once we get it on there like so, we're going to come back up here, and the belt is either in the on position, because that's where we set it when we took it off. It's kind of counterintuitive. You think it would be in the off position, but The off is referring to taking the belt off of the motor, not off the beater bar. So once we get that back in there, we're going to rotate this back to the off position, and you should feel it, that little hook in there, grab it and pull the belt tight. So we've just rotated back to the off position, and as you can see, that belt is on there tight again. So now at this point, once we get this piece back on there, we just set this back up onto the Kirby vacuum cleaner, and once it's locked in place, we then will rotate this guy back to the on position, and what it will do is that it will slip. It'll drop the belt from that hook that hooked onto it, and we'll drop it back onto the crankshaft of our vacuum cleaner. Alright, so we just locked our head back onto the crankshaft of the Kirby vacuum cleaner, and we have rotated the dial so that you can see that it's in the on belt position. So what it did is it slipped the vacuum cleaner belt from the hook that it was on onto the over the crankshaft, and now it is ready to go. So when we power up our vacuum cleaner, it's going to be turning the beater bar. So with that, we're gonna clean this up a little bit more on the shroud, get it nice and presentable, and it will be good to go. Hope this helps you out a little bit, Walter. If you have any more questions, be sure to give me a call or leave them in the comment space below, and I'll answer it for you. But that there is kind of the round, way of cleaning a, way of changing the vacuum cleaner belt on the Kirby. I believe that all models work exactly the same way. You shouldn't have any problems. Again, like, the most difficult part of learning and just getting a feel for is slipping and that beater bar on and off. But once you get that down, the rest of it becomes extremely easy.